Hi folks, welcome to the channel. Delighted to have another episode of Meet a Musicologist, and I'm very happy to be introducing Dr Matt Lawson. Matt is Senior Lecturer in Music and Subject Coordinator for BA Music at Oxford Brookes University in the UK. He's a musicologist with a particular interest in music for film and television. He's done lots of public outreach work for public musicology. He's the author, together with Lawrence MacDonald, of 100 Greatest Film Scores, and I'm very happy that he's going to be chatting with us here on the channel. So without further ado, let's have our intro. Hi, Matt.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks so much for joining, for giving up your time for chatting to us on the channel. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, just winding down into the summer, even though I've still got lots and lots to do. But teaching's finished, exam committee's finished, so trying to kind of just wind down for a few weeks before it all starts again in September.
I'm going to be asking you a series of questions today, ones that I'm going to be asking everybody who's a guest as part of this Meet a Musicologist segment, just to sort of ease us into chatting and to get to know a little bit more about you as well. So my first one, hopefully just to ease us in, how did you get into musicology? What's your story of getting to where you are now?
Completely by accident, I think, is the honest answer. I didn't even play an instrument until year 9 at school. So for anyone who's watching from outside the UK, that's 13, 14 years old. And my music teacher at school, at Malton School in North Yorkshire, where I grew up, he suddenly just kind of gave me a cornet and said, you should play this and join a brass band. And so I said, oh, okay. And he must have seen something musical in me from what I was doing on the keyboards and glockenspiels and xylophones or whatever else you do in year 7 and 8 at school. So I got into music halfway through secondary school, then enjoyed it so much that I immediately picked it for GCSE and did okay there. Then went on to A-level music, and that was when I really made the first big decision, because I knew I wanted to go to university after my A-levels, and I wasn't quite sure what to do at university. I always did very well in geography and did very well in music, and it was always between those two, geography or music. And honestly, it was probably a flip of the coin situation, because I was passionate about both subjects. Still love geography. About a week before the course started is when I decided to go to university. Everything was quite last minute with me early on. Those of you who know North Yorkshire geography, Malton is in the middle of nowhere. It's a little market town halfway between York and Scarborough. Employment for 18-year-olds wasn't great at the time. So I decided early September, I thought, I'm just going to go to university now. So I didn't have a mobile phone at the time, showing my age a little bit now. Back in the mid-2000s, I hadn't quite got my first mobile phone. And we didn't have a landline at the time either, for various reasons. So I actually went down to the village phone box to ring the university, frantically putting 20 pence coins into this phone box on hold. Must have spent about 10 quid trying to ring the university. And I eventually got through, and they said, yeah, that's fine. You can come, we've got space for you. So literally about a week later, I'm in the car on the way to Huddersfield, where I spent a wonderful 4 years. I did my second year twice, again, for various reasons. University of Huddersfield, had a great time there, wonderful music degree. And again, it got towards the end, and I thought, what do I do next? Around the first or second year of my degree, I thought music teaching was where I wanted to go, because obviously I was heavily inspired by my own music teacher, who got me into music in the first place. And it's quite a natural progression, isn't it? I suppose, to do a music degree and then go on to a PGCE. Many music students do that. But then as it got towards kind of the middle of my third year, something put me off. I did a couple of placements in a school, just really wasn't for me, I don't think. So I finished my degree, graduated, and applied for a master's at various places. But because of my financial situation, I would have needed some funding. So I applied at several places, didn't get funding. So then I had a year out, got a job, and things started kind of festering a little bit, or stagnating, should I say. And thankfully, a year later, I applied to York, which was my local university, and managed to get quite a few small scholarships to do a master's in music with a musicology emphasis. And that's when things really started to take off, because I realised I had a passion for writing about music and researching music. Did an essay at Huddersfield on the music of Harry Potter, which then leads me on to my film music stuff later on. That's where my film music passion really ignited. So yeah, I did a part-time master's at York, alongside working in Banks Music of York, a music shop in York, which some of you will be familiar with. And then that came to an end, and it's all right. I've got a master's. It's been funded. Now what? And obviously the next thing for me was a PhD, simply because, to be brutally honest, I couldn't think of anything better to do. I'd got my undergraduate, got my master's, got to the end of my master's, and thought, well, I've not really got any big plans, So I enjoy studying. Why not push myself as far as I can? So I applied to 4 or 5 different universities to do a PhD in film music. For the first 4, I didn't get the funding, and I was on holiday in Germany, in Munich, I think, at the time. And by this time, it's late July, and I was hoping for a September start, and I hadn't heard from one university. And all of a sudden, I looked at my phone when I was in Munich on holiday, and I had 3 voicemails. I said to my fiance at the time, now wife, I said, I've got 3 voicemails. I said, I'll wait until I get home. I'm not spending money listening to voicemails abroad. She said, no, listen to them. They might be important. Anyway, picked up the phone, and sure enough, it was Edge Hill University in Northwest England. They had just started offering 12 full-time PhD scholarships every year, which they've done ever since, I believe. And it was a voicemail offering me one of them, and it was my final choice. It was the last straw, literally the last straw. And they offered me a place. So after a little dance around my hotel room, I quickly got on the phone and said, yes, I'd be delighted. And so, I started there in the September of 2012. And that's it. I did my film music PhD. Decided that academia was the place for me, and as is the case in academia, kind of got bit part jobs here and there, temporary contracts, and fortunate enough this last September 2020, to be made a permanent member of staff, full-time permanent member of staff. So it's been a long, arduous journey from picking that cornet up in year 9 at school when I was 13 or 14 to now being a full-time senior lecturer in music at my current university. So a meandering journey, but that's where I am now.
I think some people watching might have an idea that people who are, in sort of positions of academia with high profile research and things like that might have always known what they wanted to do and always started out with this kind of knowledge. And it's a really big part of everybody's journey that you sort of go around, and things that were your first choice or something like that rarely work out. I really like the part of 4 or 5 applications for scholarships and things like that. That's a lot of the reality behind these kind of applications, isn't it?
It is, and it's quite a sensitive thing to talk about. But the topic of my PhD, I amended it in order to be more attractive to the people funding the PhD. So initially, my PhD initially was going to be on music in war films, which is very generic. It's it's interesting, but it doesn't grab you. I went for a few interviews where the interview panelists were basically reinforced that point. They said, this is interesting, but it's not really grabbing us. It's not cutting edge. It doesn't give us anything that's not already there. So I went away and thought about this a bit more. And one of my essays on my master's was about the music in a Holocaust documentary. And I kind of had, very sensitive, challenging topic. But I had that kind of light bulb moment where I thought, what if I look at music in Holocaust films as my main focus? And sure enough, the university that funded me said, this is such an innovative, unusual, challenging, difficult topic. We feel like we have to fund this. It's important work. You're looking at Holocaust films from a new perspective, and music in film is very manipulative, and we find this really interesting. So, studying the music of Holocaust films wouldn't have been my first choice for 3 or 4 years, because it was difficult, having to watch these films over and over again. But as cynical as it sounds, that got me the funding in order to be able to complete a doctorate. So sometimes you've got to be a bit clever with how you approach things. And I think that's exactly the same in applying for major fellowships in as a fully fledged academic. You've got to know what's attractive to the people funding you, and that was the case with me with my PhD.
Matt, you've alluded to your passion, your interest in film music. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about some of your very recent or your ongoing, your current projects for research.
One thing I've always been interested in, especially since doing my master's essay on the Holocaust documentary, and of course my PhD, which was purely on German Holocaust films, I've started thinking more broadly about music and traumatic films, and also television, video games as well. So music and trauma is the direction that I'm going in at the moment, and music and trauma on screen, both in terms of how the music depicts trauma, but also how it enables a traumatic experience within an audience, especially in terms of video games where you are playing the traumatic experience, you're interacting with a traumatic experience. So I'm in the very early stages of putting together a book proposal which will cover film, television and video games, looking at things such as 9/11, so films depicting 9/11, a very recent traumatic experience, of course. Also going back to look at the Holocaust, but also fictional trauma as well, so like the aforementioned video games, historical traumatic events like Titanic. So yeah, it's all up in the air at the minute, as research projects often are in the early stages, but I'm really interested in how, film music, it's very easy to study film music and look at John Williams, which I do extensively. Anyone that knows me knows that I adore John Williams' music. So it's very easy in lectures for me to talk about Star Wars and Harry Potter and, Howard Shore and Lord of the Rings and all this kind of really twee film music that uses big Hollywood strings, and it's all very nice. But I've become really interested in the other side of film music. Film music has been described as manipulative and manipulating emotions, and I think that raises very interesting questions when you're bringing real-life traumatic events into the equation. And it harks back to the work I did on the Holocaust, and things like Schindler's List and John Williams, a very lush, typical Hollywood Williams score, and all the ethical and moral questions that come with that, whether music should encourage these emotional responses, or whether the visual and the narrative should be enough without the music adding to it. So yeah, that's where I'm at the moment. I'm trying to expand on the work I've done on Holocaust films and kind of broaden it out into TV, video games, but also trauma and traumatic experience more broadly. On the flip side of that, I'm also currently writing a chapter on music in comedy films and slapstick comedy. So that's the complete opposite end of the spectrum, which also, it just tells you how adaptable you have to be in academia, I suppose, and it's perfectly okay to work on different things at the same time. So last week, I actually spent the morning looking at the music of Airplane and Naked Gun, and slapstick films. And in the afternoon, I watched some very kind of dark World War II films with very traumatic scenes in it. So it's one extreme to the other, but I think it keeps me on the straight and kind of level already, not having to spend all day watching these horrific sequences, and I can just go and watch a bit of Leslie Nielsen and a bit of slapstick comedy, and that brings me back down to earth. So,
all right, we're now leading on to my third question, perhaps one that I'm most excited to chat to you about, and that's your fantastic public musicology work. You're very active on YouTube with the channel The Musicologist, and I see you putting out lots of materials for sort of students and teachers as well. Perhaps you tell us a little bit about that kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose now I've got 1,000 subscribers and 250,000 views, I can call myself a YouTuber, which is very exciting. But I don't really know how that came about. I just suddenly had the urge to, I've always been into kind of video editing and create. I'm very creative, obviously, a musician, but I've always been into creating videos and kind of extracurricular tools for students. So that came about by just wanting to create a few videos to go alongside one of my film music modules. Could upload them to our virtual learning environment, and the students could have a quick revision by watching one of my videos which touches on topics that we covered in the lecture. My wife's a secondary school teacher, and I know quite a few secondary school music teachers, and a few of the videos actually started getting quite a few views from outside of the university. And my wife said, "Oh yeah, I've been using these in my lessons at my school." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah, they're a perfect level for the pupils. They love it." So I'm quite active on a Key Stage 3 music group on Facebook, where I kind of am the token academic in there, I think, talking to all these wonderful secondary music teachers, and they all went mad for it. They said, "Yeah, please do more, please do more." So I've kind of been creating videos such as an overview of the instruments of the orchestra, 60-second guides to musical periods, so the 60-second guide to romanticism, to classical period, to the Baroque period, 60-second guide to Wagner, to Beethoven, and they've become really popular. The top videos, I think the instruments of the orchestra has got something like 45,000 views, mainly from music teachers and music pupils. And of course, this really came to fruition during the recent lockdowns, where everybody was working from home, and the teachers were setting these videos as tasks for the pupils to watch. So it's brilliant. I absolutely love it. It gives me something, like yourself, for example, with this channel, it gives you something outside of the norm of our wonderful everyday jobs. And it's something creative that's not directly linked to the work we do in our day-to-day jobs. And, it has a real impact as well. Getting the comments from music pupils and teachers saying that this is a fantastic video. Thank you so much. Can you make one on this topic next? It's a really great feeling. I don't know if it's kind of rubbing the ego a little bit, which is fine. That's perfectly acceptable. But also it feels like you're giving something back. I feel incredibly privileged to be in the position that I'm in. It's a job that I never expected I would come anywhere near when I was growing up. So to be able to give something back to schools, which I know sometimes struggle with music provision, is a really nice feeling. And yeah, long may it continue. And I've kind of branched out from the YouTube channel as well, and I've gone into a couple of local schools where I work to give hour-long sessions on film music, which also derives from some of the material that I've put on the YouTube channel. So yeah, I'm a huge advocate of public musicology. I really believe that the research that we do and the interest that we've got shouldn't be confined to a university campus. I think the more we can get it out there, the better. Yeah, I mean, something else I've done as well is I've kind of gone onto local radio to talk about. I mean, I released a book a couple of years ago, which is again a general interest, kind of general public book. It's not an academic monograph. It's called the 100 Greatest Film Scores. Very, very broad. But yeah, I've been on various local radio stations just talking about my passion for film music. And one radio station, I think it was BBC Radio Sheffield, they went out into the street ahead of my interview and asked the public to hum their favorite film scores. And I just love all of that. It's taking what I'm passionate about as part of my job and part of my teaching, but taking it into the streets of Sheffield and asking people to engage with film music. And then the middle ground there is this book, which if people have an interest in film music but not a particularly academic interest in film music, that's still a good source for them to read through and start to glimpse some of the things that I might talk about in more detail in an academic sense on a university module. So
okay. All right, Matt, thanks so much for your time. I've got one more question, if that's okay. All right, what advice would you give for anybody who's watching through your channel, through this channel in general, thinking about going into music studies, but they're not sure how to do it, if it's right for them? What advice would you give?
The first bit of advice is, if you want to do it, do it. We have so many students coming to us who say, I wasn't quite sure, my parents weren't sure it was the right thing for me to do, or my tutor at school wasn't sure. If you want to study music, study music. It's your life, it's your decision, so get on with it. That's my first bit of advice. The second bit of advice really is to make sure you go out of your comfort zone. This is something that I was guilty of. I'll bring a personal anecdote into this. When I was doing my undergraduate degree at Huddersfield, at the time it was quite they had the Huddersfield Contemporary Music Festival there, and so there's a lot of experimental music going on, and that really wasn't my thing at the time. I kind of, I like film music, I like Beethoven, I like Mozart, that's me. I like Wagner, the Romantic period onwards, that's my, very classically based. And that wasn't the right attitude for me to have going into the degree. And of course, I was 18, you've not reached those levels of maturity about accepting other opinions and other types of music, but that really harmed me. Again, openly admit on the internet, I failed a module at the first attempt because I was so critical and narrow-minded about experimental music. And I had a heart-to-heart with my tutor at the time, and he said to me, you don't have to like something to appreciate it. And that was a real game changer for me, because I still wouldn't sit down and listen to serialist music or modernist music. That's just not my thing. But it's there, it exists, and it's part of music history. And so yeah, that's what I'm trying to say is, you will have your own interests, but push yourself outside your comfort zone for the first year of the program, because you never know where it might take you. We have students coming in who are absolute staunch classical musicians. They've done all their grades, they've done GCSE and A-level music. By the middle of the second year, they're in a recording studio every day because they realise that they're passionate about music technology and they've never done it before. So I think, yeah, the key message I would have is, if you want to do it, get on and do it, and don't listen to anyone who might want to put you off, because it's your life. And the second thing is, embrace everything. Embrace types and styles of music that you might never have imagined listening to, because you never know what you might stumble upon.
Okay. Matt, thank you so much for your time and for chatting. Been
absolute pleasure. Better get back to work now, I suppose.
fantastic catching up with you. Okay, thanks so much. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Bye.
Look in my eyes, what do you see? A cult of music.